We've often heard that self-pleasure or masturbation is something normal, but how true is that? To what limit can it be considered acceptable? How many times can it happen before it's seen as an addiction? And what if stopping becomes impossible? Let's dive into these questions and see why you need to let go of this act that seems harmless, but carries a hidden trap for your spiritual and personal life. Before we start, I want to acknowledge the intense topic and the attention-grabbing title. I did it because this issue is real, affecting young and old, sapping away strength and willpower, leaving many feeling helpless. This video will discuss what happens to our mind both scientifically and spiritually. We'll look into what Islam teaches us about this behavior and why it's something we should avoid. Also, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out on future content. History of masturbation. Let's begin. Nowadays, many medical professionals claim that masturbation, self-pleasure, is normal, not only in humans but even observed in animals. But that hasn't always been the case. In earlier times, self-pleasure was considered immoral, especially for men, because wasting reproductive potential was seen as going against the purpose of creation, which is to establish families and contribute to society. For women, it was also believed that engaging in such behavior would distance them from the natural relationship between husband and wife, finding satisfaction without a partner. Beyond these moral concerns, there was also the belief that it could harm one's health. Therefore, abstaining was seen as a way to protect both body and soul. Fast forward to today. One of the reasons men turn to this act is to find relief, especially in moments of insomnia. It's well known that for some, it can help induce sleep. But let's dig deeper into the real issue here. What is the harm? The problem? Studies have shown that after reaching climax, a man's brain shuts down its sexual desire, leading to a relaxed state. This deactivation even helps some to fall asleep. But what's the real danger hidden in this process? Here's the catch. When someone engages in this act, the brain releases dopamine, a chemical that gives a sense of reward, pleasure, and stress relief. This dopamine release makes it feel so good that it can lead to addiction. The brain becomes wired to chase after more dopamine, always seeking more stimulation, and just like that, one can fall into a cycle of seeking pleasure that leads nowhere productive. Islam teaches us that excessive indulgence in desires leads to harm. Allah warns us against following our lower desires blindly, for they distract us from His remembrance. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, "Whoever can guarantee me what is between his two jawbones and what is between his two legs, I will guarantee him paradise." Tirmidhi. This hadith reflects how self-control, especially regarding our desires, is key to spiritual success. When you allow dopamine to flood your brain repeatedly, it becomes harder to control the habit. Your brain will constantly crave the same pleasure, and you'll find yourself trapped. Even when your brain tries to put a stop to it by blocking receptors, it becomes frustrating because the pleasure you once felt is no longer there, driving you deeper into dissatisfaction. This pattern of behavior resembles that of any other addiction, whether it's to smoking, food, or alcohol. Islamic perspective on self-control. Now you might wonder, what does Islam teach us about controlling such desires? Islam places great emphasis on self-discipline and controlling one's urges. The Quran repeatedly reminds us to be mindful of our actions and to restrain from following our lower desires. In fact, the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, emphasized the importance of fasting for those who struggle with controlling their desires. He said, "O young men, whoever among you can afford to marry, let him marry, for it restrains the eyes from looking at forbidden things, and protects the private parts from committing illegal sexual intercourse. And whoever cannot afford to marry is advised to fast, as fasting diminishes sexual power."
صحيح البخاري.
Unlike the philosophy of Stoicism, where self-control is rooted in individual strength, Islam teaches us that true strength lies in seeking help from Allah. We are reminded to turn to Him in moments of weakness, to make dua, and to ask for guidance. It is through our connection with Allah that we can find the power to overcome harmful desires. Islam encourages reflection and self-regulation, guiding us to live balanced lives where we fulfill our natural desires in permissible ways, such as through marriage. The key is moderation in following the halal path, avoiding anything that harms our relationship with Allah. Inspirational story. I'd like to share a story of someone who once struggled with compulsive self-pleasure. They sought comfort in it, hoping for a temporary escape, only to be met with guilt and frustration after each act. It was only when they turned to Islam, focusing on their relationship with Allah and practicing self-restraint, that they experienced real change. They found peace in prayer, fasting, and reflecting on the Quran. Today, they live with a sense of fulfillment that goes far beyond any momentary pleasure, having escaped the cycle of addiction. Scholarly opinions on masturbation. While the video emphasizes the negative impacts of self-pleasure from both a spiritual and psychological perspective, it is important to acknowledge the diversity of opinions within Islamic scholarship on this issue. Many scholars across different schools of thought strongly discourage or even forbid masturbation, citing the importance of guarding one's chastity and controlling one's desires as essential aspects of Islamic ethics. However, some scholars take a more nuanced approach. In specific situations, such as when one fears falling into a greater sin like zina, fornication, a few scholars have permitted masturbation as a lesser evil, makruh. This view is often based on the principle of choosing the lesser harm in situations where alternatives may be more spiritually damaging. For instance, scholars from the Hanbali and Shafi'i schools of thought allow it in cases of dire need, where a person is unable to marry or fast and fears falling into prohibited actions. That being said, even those who permit it under exceptional circumstances stress that it should not be habitual or a source of indulgence. The overarching goal in Islam is to develop strong self-control, purify one's intentions, and seek lawful, halal, means to fulfill desires, such as through marriage. This variety of opinions reflects the flexibility of Islamic jurisprudence in accommodating different situations while still upholding the ethical principles of Islam. The consensus remains that controlling one's desires is a key factor in leading a disciplined and spiritually fulfilling life. Conclusion. In Islam, the emphasis on self-discipline, especially in controlling desires, is crucial for spiritual growth and success in this life and the hereafter. While masturbation is largely discouraged, there is room for differing opinions in Islamic scholarship, particularly in situations where it may prevent a greater harm like zina. Ultimately, seeking strength from Allah through prayer, fasting, and turning to permissible avenues like marriage is the ideal way to manage desires. In striving for self-control and balance, we align our actions with the greater purpose of nurturing our spiritual relationship with Allah and living according to His guidance.